All right, we are going live. Maybe I'll get viewers, maybe not. This video is intended for a specific recipient, but I also realize that the answer to the question asked might be to the benefit of a broader population of people. Pardon me. I think I clicked go live about a moment too soon. I was grabbing some books. And do bear with me, I'm competing with I've got this stupid cadet heater, and it gives me bad dry mouth. The pop probably doesn't help. Bear with me while I get situated. All right. So about a week and a half ago, I received a private message on social media from a person younger than me, college aged, and they were asking, based off of what I saw on your profile, you have, God is one. A quote from Sai Baba of Shirdi, by the way. And they asked, how can I get to know that God? I want to know God as you know God. And again, I say this in my live stream. You see it in my username. I'm a reverend. I'm an ordained minister. I've publicly borne that title for over a year now. And this was the first time I'd received a serious inquiry from anyone. I was touched, very flattered, and humbled. But I also accepted the responsibility of answering such a question and to answer it right. I meditated on it. I thought of all the different ways I could make a response. And time kept escaping me. So here I am now. Local time, it's 12:55 a.m. The beauty of the internet means that this can be viewed anytime, any place, anywhere. And the reason I'm sharing this is to answer the question. How did I get to know God? I think it's a fair question. I've got a good relationship with that entity. But certainly nothing that anyone else can't have themselves. That's the first thing I want to come out and say. Don't let the title fool you. I don't believe that I'm in any position of superiority. I don't believe that I'm in any more of an enlightened position than anyone else is capable of. I don't think that I have the answer. I don't think any one person has the answer. I think the answer is upon the individual to find within their own selves. But let me get started. So I was raised Christian. I was baptized in the Methodist Church as a baby, and then a little later in my childhood was baptized through immersion into the Baptist Church when I was 9 years old. Even then, I had doubts about what was being presented to me in Sunday school, in the sanctuary, in children's church, and I felt like not all my questions got answered. I had a hard time believing that non-Christians went to hell. I had a hard time believing that only Christians went to heaven. That was a hard concept to even confront. The idea that good people, for simply not professing faith in one thing, specifically a person, would not achieve salvation, and that the alternative wasn't some boring waiting room, but a place of eternal torment. That never sat well with me. Even as a kid, it just haunted me. And You know, God works in mysterious ways. It's a cliche to say it, but it wouldn't be a cliche if it weren't true. And over the last couple of years, I've had to really accept all the times God has revealed itself, themself, to me. I tend to not attribute gender to our Creator. Um, that is a tradition followed by the Sikhs, also pronounced the Sikhs. I follow in that footstep and try to keep God gender neutral. I may occasionally lapse and ascribe the gender to them. Typically, I try to stay gender neutral, though. But my first real comfortable exposure to God, I've had to understand that came to me not tripping on mushrooms at a music festival, not smoking dope, not on a hike, but that my experience with God goes as far back as my childhood. And I have just the book. I still have the book from my childhood that turned me on to the concept of God. Now, this library behind me, this is actually the secular library. The spiritual library is in the second room. But it's this book. And no, it's not from the text. Dear Alex, we hope you enjoy this book. Love from Papa and Grandma. Christmas 1996. This is a coffee table book about the Beatles' career, written by a guy named Jeffrey Giuliano. Jeffrey Giuliano himself, outside of his career as a writer, was briefly involved, is still involved with the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And of course, I didn't know that at the time. However, what it does include, sorry, I thought I had it picked out. What it does include is this picture of George Harrison, his wife Patty. On the far right, Dhananjaya Dasa. And then on your left, my right, is His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Now, I'm not going to comment on ISKCON. They're a controversial group. I've got my issues with them. Separate the organization from the man, his interpretation of spirit and spirituality, and his actual life's work. This man was the spiritual instructor to my favorite Beatle, George Harrison. At age 9, George was my favorite Beatle. Now, at age 9, the reason I picked him as my favorite Beatle was because he was the one who didn't smile in his photos. And as a kid, I always thought, why do I always have to smile in photos? So just based off of that little bit of identification. And it's kind of carried on from there to an appreciation of the spiritual because of that book. And it talks extensively about the spiritual side of the Beatles. Their trip to India is chronicled. Probably shouldn't have just tossed it to the side, should I? So, chapter 4 of this book is called The Inner Light in Search of Meaning. Check out this collage that the author assembled. Students of the Vedas or of the Bhagavad Gita might recognize some of these images from a Hare Krishna book, as well as these photos of the Beatles from their trip to India. And some bookmarks just fell. But yeah, there's some Vedic art there. Listen to this. My life belongs to Lord Krishna now. I'm just the servant of Krishna. I've never been so humble in my life, and I feel great. You're just left with yourself all the time, whatever you do anyway. You've got to get down to your own God and your own temple. It's all down to you, mate. That was a John Lennon quote. The first one was George. This is Paul McCartney. God is everything. God is in the space between us. God is in the table in front of you. And then Ringo. Ringo is my girlfriend's favorite Beatle. The four of us have had the most hectic lives. We've got almost everything money can buy, but of course, that just means nothing after a time. But we've found something now that really fills that gap, and that is the Lord. I was 9 when I first read this. 9. And I'm looking through it as this coffee table book about my heroes from Yellow Submarine, from Help, the guys who did Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. I only knew them as musicians. This fleshed them out to me as people, more so than the Beatles anthology, the TV series. And then how does this chapter start? The Beatles' first encounter with marijuana was on New Year's Eve, 1962. So that's what kicked it off for them. But for George, it was the attraction to all things Hindu and Indian. He talks about it in the Beatles anthology. Here's a picture of him from 1966. And he said that when he first encountered the music of Ravi Shankar, the great Indian sitarist, he said something about it felt so familiar to him, like it was something from a past lifetime that just resonated so fondly with him. And really, I got to say, one notion that is absent from Western religious thought is the concept of reincarnation. Perhaps we're too obsessed with the present to recognize the truth, but we absolutely reincarnate. Before I carry on, though, there was that mention in the book, so happy holidays. Seas of love. Will do. Hello again, Aaron. So this got me thinking at an early age, 4th grade, about what is this version of God called Krishna? I really got to stop putting the book away. All right. So just imagine you're 9 years old. You're learning a more fleshed out version of your favorite band's story. And in it is, here's George on his trip to India. But then right here, there they are. Radha and Krishna. Srimati Radharani and Krishna, the transcendental couple that captured the hearts of both George and John. I keep coming back to this, but it's not like I sat down and read this thing cover to cover and totally picked up on it. But that exposure at that early of an age warmed me up to the idea of having a more mystical connection with God. Going to church every Sunday didn't resonate with me at all. I had to sit there in uncomfortable clothes and tight shoes and get dragged around, and I hated it. And that sort of logic was frequently applied in discipline, and sometimes I was excessively disciplined as a kid. That's all I'm going to say about that for now. So, come my high school years, we have a tyrant in the White House saying that we're engaged in a holy war. And none of it makes sense to me. Everyone around me is pro-war, but they also believe in Jesus. And I couldn't quite reconcile that. This also was small town Indiana, where being gay, now I'm straight. I'm probably about as reasonably straight as one can be in this nothing is black and white world we live in. It's just not for me. But my best friends and some of my best friends in high school and in college were gay. And growing up in small town Indiana, growing up in a fascist theocracy like small town Indiana can be, you understand, even at an early age, 17, 18, um, the social consequences and really not social consequences, the gravity of your friend privately coming out to you. And and the necessary steps to protect their identity. My best friend in college, his boyfriend was violently evicted from his childhood home by his parents for coming out gay to them. And these were devout religious people who went to church every Sunday. And this was their response to that. And that never resonated with me either. That isn't what Jesus would do. You know, we all had those bracelets in elementary school, the WWJDs. I don't think he would do that. So, really coming to that understanding, I'm getting a little bogged, a little lost in the weeds. But really, it was George Harrison who turned me onto the concept of God and kept me from giving up. And perhaps I should just jump ahead to that. 2009, I was graduating from college, and I just had this crisis where I asked myself, what the hell is it all about? I had just finished my bachelor's degree in underwater basket weaving and was going on to get my master's in advanced aquatic basket weaving studies. So maybe some of the existential feelings I had were connected to that. But also just, I recognized that I'd been in school nonstop. I'd just been a constant student. I thought, well, at some point, I'm going to have to think about other stuff. And what is it all about? And I started thinking about what comes after death. What happens after we die? Is it lights out? Is there an afterlife? Do we reincarnate? Where do we go? What do we do? Like that Monty Python sketch. What do we do? What do we say? What do we think? What do we feel? What do we eat? What do we sleep? Just like this runaway freight train. And my thoughts got the best of me. I didn't get unsafe with myself or anything, thank God. But I was just torn by these fits of insomnia, and freaked out at the thought of what if the atheists are right? That terrified me. So I thought, well, they can't be. Plain and simply, they can't be. I don't know what it was that was telling me this, but this drive inside me told me to pursue truth. And now it's probably as good a time as any. You know what? I'm actually going to do this like the sadhus do in India. There's a YouTube channel where you can actually watch sadhus over in India in vibe. Much easier on the throat. So, my first year away from home, I got the fuck off the Christian evangelical plantation. You have to. I think Christianity has been subverted, and what was being crammed down my throat is as representative of Christianity as ISIS is for Islam. And there were great people at my church growing up, and there were some closed-minded assholes at my church growing up. I'm blessed to say that I have an open-minded, pluralistic father who has told me since I was a kid, Jesus is a way, not the way. My mom, a Methodist minister's daughter, had to come around. When I left the flock, she told me, you need to think about whether or not you want to be in the smoking section in the afterlife. And I had to say, you're wrong. And that took faith. It took balls, but it took faith. It took a lot more faith than it took balls. And it came from researching. It came from understanding that as wonderful as Jesus Christ's message is, he wasn't the only one. For his place in time, certainly. But that the Christian faith, the modern Christian faith, fails in its overemphasis on the worship of Jesus Christ as a person, not as a God-man, and certainly not in being overly focused on worship of the creator deity, and that is God, known also as Allah, or Brahman, or Waheguru, or Krishna. The entity goes by many names. But the first thing I had to do was get off the Christian plantation. The second thing I did was pursue the Judaic tradition. And my training came under a rather, forgive the pun, unorthodox way. I studied under a Reconstructionist rabbi. For those of you who are familiar with Judaism, if I were to place the different sects of Judaic thought on a spectrum, I would say Hasidim is here, the Hasidic Jewish faith. Beautiful faith. I had a few friends who were Hasids in Borough Park in Brooklyn. It's a mystical branch of Judaism. Orthodoxy, conservative, reform, and then Reconstructionist. Certainly open for debate, but this is my interpretation of it. Reconstructionist Judaism is perhaps closer to Buddhist teachings than it is to Abrahamic Judaism and certainly Talmudic Judaism and the Judaism of the Hasids. Belief in God is optional, and it's more about the lifestyle and the philosophy than the religion. But the rabbi who I took classes under, she was the first one. Yes, she. I'm really happy to say I've had great conversations with clerics of all faiths, and I don't know how many trans or non-binary clerics there are in the world, but for now, male and female, with clerics of both of the mainstream genders. But I'm also really happy to say that my first training outside of Christianity was under the tutelage of a female and under the tutelage of a mother. Rabbi Sue was her name. I think she's still at Indiana University. She's a glorious woman. Great sense of humor, a great listener, as gifted as a cleric as she is a social worker. She was the one who first said to me this: "You're a musician. You'll get this. Just as there are all these different radio stations for this one thing called music. God is too big to fit inside one religion." I can't not smile saying it now. It gets a monkey off your back when you think about it. Then you start to realize how much people are duking it out over their version of the same thing. And then you'll get a little more pissed off. But God is too big to fit inside one religion. I heard that in 2006. I was 19. And it stuck with me. It really did. It kept me going. I eventually decided not to convert to Judaism. A few reasons. One was I felt that I didn't have it in me to learn another language, and it felt like a lot of it was culturally a lot of Hebrew. Never mind the liturgical usage of it. And I just thought I didn't have it on my plate. I also thought, well, all right, this is just one religion. And if what I've heard from this rabbi is true, she's sure as heck isn't going to stop me on my search, and I commend her for not saying, wait, stay. I feel like certain Christian pastors might have, and I feel like other clerics and other faiths might. But I'm really happy to say that in this instance, I was told, you got to do what you got to do. And it was with her blessing. And so, like I said, I had this brief lull where I settled on the idea of being what I called an optimistic agnostic throughout college, where I held on to deist beliefs. And I got really turned on to the idea of Thomas Jefferson interpreting the Bible to only include the text in red letters, that is to say, the words spoken by Jesus Christ. Not that I sat down and got my Bible back out, because I had just told my parents and the Christian faith to kiss off. So I wasn't about to step back into that. But the whole camel and the eye of the needle thing stayed with me. The idea of Jesus as a social reformer stuck with me. And I would come back to him eventually. It's a different story for a different time, maybe later in this video. But so I just held on to something, and it was that, all right, maybe it'll be something, and but I don't know. I was luckily too preoccupied with college to think too much about it. Sirom. All right. So, I found out at the tail end of my senior year of college that I was going to go to grad school. First got into UMass Boston, then I heard back from another school, from Brooklyn College, and I thought, which city do I want to go to more? Both programs were great, both schools seemed awesome. I decided I'm going to move to Brooklyn. So my then girlfriend and I moved to Brooklyn. And the conclusion I reached when I was in Bloomington, Indiana was this. The spiritual crisis, I was able to subside. I was able to put it on ice by saying this. I was walking from her place to mine. It was at 5 a.m. It was July, which is a very gross time of year in Indiana. Very hot, very sticky. Your balls stick to the inside of your thigh. It's not pleasant. I hate Indiana summers. I will go in the fall. I will go in the spring. I'm going this winter. I'm not going to go in the summer if I don't have to. But early morning, when it's all just dew and crickets and the air's just got this slight bite to it, only because the humidity is so high, it's magic. And that's not the weed talking. It's simply magic. 5 o'clock in the morning, summertime in Indiana, just before the sun comes up. Catch the sunset. But I was walking across the Indiana University campus. And if you're watching this and if you've been there, it is a campus that is surrounded by foliage. It's a beautiful green campus. A lot of limestone buildings, so there's almost like a color theme, like it's all just springing out of the earth. Kind of looks like something out of Star Wars, like Yavin from the first Star Wars film. And I just paused and took a breath and looked all around me, and I realized all the life was not there by accident. And subsequently, I wasn't here by accident. All these people weren't here by accident. And I had just finished studying history for 4 years, and I just thought, well, in the grand scheme of things, like, civilization didn't come about by accident. And mind you, I was not smoking pot back then. I was a complete teetotaler. So this thought came to me stone sober. And I'm just like, wait a tick. Even if we started off as monkeys and we got smarter and smarter and smarter and developed this thing called civilization and language and culture and all that, it's not been because of this accidental chemical spill. It's been to serve a greater good, and that greater good is our Creator. And I'm going to find out as much as I can about that Creator. And I went back to my apartment, which was like just up the hill, sat and I did what I guess amounted to a meditation, and concluded, all right, I'm going to one of the most diverse cities in the world, New York. It's going to be one of the most religiously diverse cities as well. If it exists, it'll be there, whatever it is. Never mind going to the Hillel Center or going to the Indian Cultural Center or there's a Buddhist monastery in Bloomington, which is beautiful, worth the visit. Bloomington's a jewel in Indiana. I recommend it highly. I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing it next week. So I get to New York, and the first thing I do is connect to faith communities. The first faith community to which I connected was the Baha'i faith. Now, I ended up not finding my spiritual home in the Baha'i faith, but I did pick up on some inspirational ideas. And what inspired me the most is the concept of progressive revelation. Now, the Baha'i faith itself was founded in the 19th century by a prophet named Baha'u'llah in Persia, I believe, modern-day Iran. And what they put forth is that throughout the history of humans, these different people have come down and they've been messengers of God. This idea is called progressive revelation. Now, Baha'u'llah looked at Zoroaster, he looked at Jesus, he looked at Muhammad, he looked at Moses, he looked at Rama, he looked at Krishna, and he also considered himself to be the latest and the greatest and the last for 1,000 years. That's what immediately caused me to check out from having any further interest in the faith, because I thought, well, they've closed the door. There's also some anti-gay in their doctrine, and there's really like no way around it. But it's like 3 steps in. Surface level, though, it's a beautiful faith, and at Baha'i gatherings, they're often interfaith in nature, where little tiny scriptures are printed out in a bowl, and they're attributed to their source. And you read it, and they're typically centered around a theme. But we met this couple who would host get-togethers on Friday nights, and they were often centered around themes. And when they learned that I was interested in another faith, they actually started to incorporate stuff from that faith into the readings. It was mostly Baha'i, but also New and Old Testament, so Judaic and Christian biblical texts. Quotes from rabbis as well, Native American spirituality. My first real exposure to that, I'm a bit embarrassed to say. Some Hindu thought, words from the Dhammapada, words other Buddhist scripture as well. And I really enjoyed witnessing the connection to God that would happen in those circles. The devotional part was great. We'd hear all these different scriptures. It was a bit like hearing people playing their favorite songs in a way. But they were randomly chosen, and that was fun too. But then they would often sing, and it would be a very simple chant like, "Oh my God, my beloved, oh my God, my beloved," real sweet, and they'd get a drum out. Again, complete teetotalers, not hippies. They didn't have dreadlocks. No alcohol, which was cool. I don't think Baha'is drink. I might be wrong on that. Vegetarian meals, very wholesome, and a very diverse group. There were Black folks from the neighborhood who would come over. This was in Flatbush, which is a very Caribbean-dominant neighborhood, and it was beautiful. It was folks from all different class backgrounds. I loved it. It was a real neat exposure to urban life. I grew up in a small town, went to a college town for my education, so here I am in the city. And, I'm praying alongside folks who are not my color, and I loved it. I love the oneness of it, that we all were able to sit down and say, like, Well, my day at school was this. Well, my day working here was that. My day working in the city was this. My day at the airport was like that. And then we were able to come together with that one unifying force, and that was our mutual love of God, which turned into a love for one another. Um, I think fondly of those times and those people. But eventually, yours truly, again, was befallen by a fit of insomnia, and I Googled, what religion am I? Because I wasn't totally satisfied with the Baha'i faith, and I thought, well, if anything, this could potentially serve as a roadmap while I considered my options here in New York. And I took a quiz, a fucking quiz. I took the big question and put it into the hands of an internet quiz. Mind you, it is a fairly well thought out quiz with decent metrics. And this is me being a bit of a geek talking about it, but multiple choice. You're able to rank the importance of the choices. So pretty well constructed from a programming perspective. But it was called the Belief-O-Matic. I think it's still up. I wonder. Oh, absolutely. The Belief-O-Matic is still up. Maybe we'll do that in a future video. Cool. I just searched it. But yeah, check it out if you haven't done it. The Belief-O-Matic, it's 20 questions. And they're real thinkers. These are not softball questions. It's, what is your conception of God? Why do bad things happen to good people? What happens after we die? What are your thoughts on homosexuality? What are your thoughts on abortion? Should gender roles be prescribed? What are the origins of the universe? How important are these things to you? That's always the second part with each of these. And then I believe you get like nearly 20 different options presented to you in this percentile breakdown. The first time I took it, the top 5, what were they? This was fall of 2009. Thing is, it really hasn't changed much either. I think it was liberal Quaker, Mahayana Buddhism, Sikhism, Theravada Buddhism, and I think Hinduism was maybe somewhere closer, still in the top 10. But I was not surprised to see, yeah, fuck Joel Osteen. For those of you viewing at home, post facto, I comment on the live comments. But the bottom was it was Mormonism. Let's see, I think it was Mormonism, Scientology, atheism. I'm more likely to become an atheist than I am a Scientologist or a Mormon. And then these others, these different. I'm glad it makes me have to review them, but it's still annoying. I have to lean forward and click. So anywho, Christianity was all near the bottom, aside from Unitarian. I think Unitarian might have also been in the top 5. I got it saved somewhere. Oh, right on. I respect that. I also don't blame you. The world's an ugly place. So I looked at that breakdown and thought, well, there's my list. So my girlfriend and I, her name was Shelly. Shelly and I went to a Quaker service. It was nice. Some of it was inspired. For those of you who don't know, Quaker services, Quakers believe in silent worship. And it is a form of mystical practice, which is to say, sitting and waiting for a message, true meditation in that sense of like being an antenna. And it was neat to visit. It was neat to see a Christian version of that. So the congregation itself was 3 sides all around. And they all just sat. There were no clergy. There were deacons and deaconesses. There was two elders, a married couple, who introduced themselves and welcomed newcomers. So we stood up and waved for everyone. It is good for introverts. very quiet place. And some people would just like stand up and say, God is love, or I had this moment where a good thing happened, and people would say amen. But then near the end, um, you know, I don't want, this is not me shitting on Quakerism. This is me pointing out just a weird moment. This guy stood up and started talking about his day, and then the day after that, and the day after that. And it was just very, very much just his last couple of days. And then it dawned, at least on me and Shelley, that this guy's just real lonely. And he was starting to say, like, oh, and I hope we can all get to hang out soon and all get to know one another. And then one of the deacons came up, this little old white lady came up and tapped him and just went, shh. And he stops. And he like hangs his head. And he sat. Sad. Real fucking sad. They had a meal afterwards, which was nice, but I didn't want to go back after that. It was weird. It was a very white crowd, and it was a very old crowd. Kind of looked like a Green Party meeting, to be honest. So, that was that, just like Kill Bill. Off the list. And so then it was onwards to the Baha'i faith, and that's when we met our friends Luke and Katie, who are wonderful people. Wherever they are, I wish them the best. I've lost touch with them, not being on Facebook anymore and stuff. But so it goes. So then another one that came up near the top, and it struck me as kind of an odd one because I knew it as an Eastern religion, was Sikhism, also known as Sikhism, Sikhism. I knew it as Sikhism, then I met Sikhs, and it is pronounced Sikhism. And if you can, try to aspirate the H. I can sort of do it. But a couple things mesmerized me right away, learning about the faith. They are strict monotheists. Takes any confusion out of the question. All right, just one God. No Trinity, no polytheistic, no canon, no Mount Olympus. Just one God. Does that God have a body? No. That God is formless. That God is this ethereal beyond the beyond, known as Waheguru, which means in Punjabi, which means great teacher. Guru itself means dispeller of darkness. As someone who at the time was in grad school pursuing my master's degree, I thought, well, I'm a student. That's what Sikh means. The idea of God as the great teacher, I can get down with that. And instead of saints, instead of prophets, instead of God-men, instead of avatars, they only have these 10 human mortal gurus who existed in Punjab during this specific point in time, starting in, I think, 1469 on to 1699. During that period of time, 10 gurus existed. And that's where they put forth one God, no superstitions. So they didn't believe in kosher or halal rituals for food. They didn't believe in offering food to the deities. They believe in communal meals that are prepared vegetarian style so that everyone can consume them. They're held after worship. It's called langar. It's a lot of fun. Great food too. Super spicy. Love it. And rather than have a succession of gurus into the modern time, their living guru is their scripture, which is a composite. It's a composite of poetry, songs, prayers, meditations, written not just by their gurus, by the Sikh gurus of Punjab, but also there are quotations of Sufi and Hindu literature as well, and references to Hindu deities. So technically it is the world's first interfaith scripture. And Sikhism has since grown into being the world's 5th largest religion. Another central component of their faith is honest living, eternal optimism, continual remembrance of God. They believe in chanting God's name as a form of meditation, not unlike the Hare Krishnas. Um, and they did historically emerge around the same point in time, the 15th century. So I think the same lightning bolt was just hitting all over the world. That's my thought. I got into Gaudiya Vaishnavism, which is the religion of the Hare Krishnas, as an adult. I briefly called myself a Sikh, but everyone started asking me where my beard was. And I tried to explain to them, well, there are Sahajdati Sikhs, which means Sikhs who do not follow that. They don't grow the beards out. But it became too much. So perhaps someday. So then I got into the teachings of ISKCON and Hare Krishna, which is, like I said, mired in controversy, but Prabhupada himself, I think, was a very smart man. And he believed in using religion as a way as a means of good. I think the International Society for Krishna Consciousness has done a world of good for people facing addiction and homelessness. They've given them a house and a reason to live. They've gotten them off drugs. I wish this got more publicity. They do a very good job of it too. And honestly, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to substitute your snack addiction for an addiction to chanting God's name. You could do a lot worse. And Prabhupada's words, I think, are very easy to read. He's a bit fanatical at times, a bit rigid in his thinking, but he has to be to get his point across. I'm still very pluralistic in my own views. I think all paths are many. Truths are one, paths are many. I'm a great fan of the Tao Te Ching as well. To get back to the original message that inspired this video, it's been 45 minutes and I've given a good deal of personal history. And I am nowhere near done. I've just been talking about the isms I've been into. But that's just it. I don't think the answer is held in any institution, or any person, or a group of people. And I'm not the only person in history who has said that. I think it's in all people. Charlie Chaplin said that. Jesus Christ has said that. The kingdom of God does not exist in one man or group of men, but in all men. People. I don't know what's up with that gingerbread man thing that Carlson's on about. One, I'm glad he's not bitching about immigrants because he is so vile when he talks about them. Two, he talks about being a Christian. What the hell did gingerbread men have to do with Christianity and Christmas? Fools, false prophets, and charlatans. But the good book warns about them too. Really dig the Tao. I think there's a lot of overlap between the Tao Te Ching and the Upanishads. Yeah, he is. For students of the Vedas, or for people who grew up with the Bible, I think the Psalms are a great place to turn for metaphysics. There's a lot of stuff about like where we come from and ruminations to God, about God. Lots of good stuff there. I think there's a little too much crime and punishment in the Bible, a little too much storytelling without morality. The God of the Old Testament's pretty brutal. I agree with the assertion about Abraham and the son, that's pretty psychotic behavior on the part of God. I like what I've read from the Quran. I don't know enough about it to talk about it freely. I'm learning. I'm in the process of learning. It's hard to find sources that are not drowning in controversy. If anyone viewing knows where I can turn for good sources on Quranic study, that'd be great. One more Beatles-related thing. There are some Hindu teachers found on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And these aren't bad places to start either. Prabhupada's teachings are fantastic. I take this everywhere with me when I travel. And if I can't bring this, I have a pocket version of it. And it's the same 1972 edition pocket version. I'm that big of a dork. And I've got versions up here on the shelf if anyone ever needs to come over and they're experiencing a crisis, which has happened 0 times. Fantastic book, great commentary. But on the cover of Sgt. Pepper are a few gurus, including Yukteswar Giri, who is the author of, that's not Science of the Soul, The Holy Science. And let's see. Lahiri Mahasaya is peeping through right there. And what's his name? Yogananda's here somewhere. Bingo. And that's Lawrence of Arabia. Yogananda is a great writer, and I recommend Autobiography of a Yogi to anyone who wants to see a reconciliation and a bridge between Christian and Vedic thought. Ooh. What's that one? Mark 10, 24, 27. Search engine time. Keep it unnamed. The disciples were amazed at his words. But Jesus said again, "Children, how hard it is to enter the kingdom of God. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God." The disciples were even more amazed and said to each other, "Who then can be saved?" Jesus looked at them and said, "With man this is impossible, but not with God. All things are possible with God." That is the best stuff in that book. And frankly, if any one line were to survive of that book, let it be that. It contains everything right there, including the deity reference. Speaking of crucial texts, as I go out of frame ever so professionally and back in. Some people are really down on Gandhi these days. I don't like that. I think that's some CIA propaganda bullshit. But it's after 1, so of course I'm talking about that. All right. Mahatma Gandhi, though, did once say that if all of Hinduism were to go away, but only the first lines of the Isha Upanishad were to survive, Hinduism would survive itself. Here it is. It's the first verse. The Lord is enshrined in the hearts of all. The Lord is the supreme reality. Rejoice in the Lord through renunciation. Covet nothing. All belongs to the Lord. That's the essence of Hinduism in a drop right there. Or Vedanta, or Sanatana Dharma, or whatever some honky doing stretches wants to call it. I think I'm just going to keep calling it Hinduism. I've stuck up for it in the past as Vedanta, but whatever. So the thrust of the message that this young person sent me was about how to foster that connection with God, and as they are on break from school, what texts they would recommend, as well as what practices they would perhaps advise. So, this is phase 3 of the video for sure. And that gives me a chance to wind down. Probably going to be on for another 20 minutes or so. The first thing I recommend is to develop a practice of mysticism. Don't let that word scare you. Let it be a form of prayer, meditation, some form of expression of thanks and gratitude that you have a creator and that you're alive. Some people use yoga to be that part. And I think that has the potential to cultivate the physical self more than the spiritual self, especially the way Westerners do it. But I'm a bit stuffy, and I also have a prop to show off. This was given to me by Parampara Das, a servant of Krishna. I got this at New Vrindavan, West Virginia in 2013. You don't have to apologize. I have no idea what for. This is made out of Tulsi wood, which is holy basil, a sacred bead. There's 108 of them. When I remember, which is not as often as I'd like to say, I chant on it. Typically, I'll chant Hare Krishna or I'll chant Waheguru. Those are the two names for God with which I'm the most comfortable and with which give me the most connection. Whatever works. Maybe it's Allah. Maybe it's something else. Try it out. Meditation for 30 minutes isn't bad either. Try it out. First thing in the morning, early in the morning, not too late at night. You don't want to accidentally doze off. That's happened to me before. That will happen to me tonight. I will go try and meditate after this video, and I will wake up to my alarm. But I do want to show off some more books, because I'm a dork. This one's one of a kind. Well, not one of a kind, but harder to find. I got this from a temple in Queens. And it also has my personal travel temple in it. This travels with me everywhere, too. This is not a religious text, but it does come awfully close. All right, so let's go through it. The Upanishads I really enjoy. These are meditations on our existence, on where we come from, the origins of the universe, what happens after death. Typically, you'll get about 10 to 13 principal Upanishads packaged together. This book, I believe, contains 16. The translator is this guy, Eknath Easwaran. He is was an interfaith teacher, has a great book out on meditation that I can only recommend. This is a great book, great translation, excellent commentary, and yeah, you can see my copy's worn out. This has traveled with me through 48 states. Love this book. The Tao Te Ching is something similar, and this is the Barnes and Noble version. I got it for a couple bucks, $5.95. Let's see. There are good random ones. Which is dearer, fame or your life? Which is greater, your life or possessions? Which is more painful, gain or loss? Therefore, we always pay a great price for excessive love and suffer deep loss for great accumulation. Knowing what is enough, you will not be humiliated. Knowing where to stop, you will not be imperiled and can be long-lasting. This is a cool philosophy. It promotes temperance, and there's a lot of rationality to it. There's a great degree of peace. There is a great degree of peace to this text. I do still see some theism to it, although it does not boast to be a God-centered text. I'm going to get very real, very fast. I do apologize. content warning. Last year, I almost took my own life, and it was because of the situation I was in. I got myself out of it, and I talked myself out of it. And what saved me was Sai Baba. I can't really explain how, but he did. And his was the vision that came to me. He's a figure who's appeared in other books that I've got. He's on Incense. He's in a couple books by one we'll see in a minute. And just sort of coming out of that gloom, his was the vision that I saw in my dream, and it brought me a degree of peace. Now, this is Sai Baba of Shirdi. He is revered by Muslims and Hindus alike as a holy man. And the fact that he's embraced by two different faiths and that he preached the unity of both and of all religions is what makes him so noteworthy. And that's what inspired me to make 2018 a better year for myself. And I have. I'm really happy to say that. And I'm in a much better place than I was a year ago. But Sai Baba is my personal Jesus. There's a temple dedicated to him in Queens. There are temples to him dedicated all over the place. I live in a city with a great bookstore, and the religion section there is super stocked. This was a great pickup I found this year. This is a book of Rastafari poetry and hymns. Less said, the better. I'm not a scholar on the subject. There are not many great translations out there of the Guru Granth Sahib, that is the Sikh text, but this awesome book is a guide to Sikhism. I recommend it highly. It is written by a British scholar, and their perspective is of a country with a higher population of Sikhi. So a complete description of the philosophy of Sikhi, which that's the right term for the faith. If you're interested in the life of Baha'u'llah, here's a good one. And I'm going to end after getting a little cooler, because it is warming here. In a past stage in my own present lifetime, I was in the world of academia, and I didn't care for it. I enjoyed teaching, but much of the cultural responsibilities of being an academic and some of the stuff surrounding it was just a little too politicized for me, among other things. Too much privilege. Something I share in common is the author of this book. Richard Alpert became Ram Dass, wrote this excellent book, Be Here Now. He dropped acid with Timothy Leary, saw God, and wrote this crazy, crazy book. He lost his job, went to India, had this crazy trip, crazy pilgrimage. Here's a picture of him doing his thing under the tree. And in the middle part is filled with mystical art, including Jaya Hanuman, it's a beautiful book. There's a lot of stuff going on here. If anyone's ever seen this before, this is a cool book. But the fact that he gave up his past, sort of the life he set up for himself. I did something similar. Alexa and I were not happy in New York. And we decided we wanted to move away from it and start again. We were nomads for a while, traveled across the country. And through it all, I've just started to find that spiritual peace. It's not about stuff. That was what I learned reading this book, is that that detachment from materialism is so important. Anger, lust, greed, ego, and attachment. Those are the five evils. Five evils you got to conquer in life. Anger, lust, greed, ego, and attachment. There's no sin. You just got to overcome those qualities within your own self. Think about the things that inspire those qualities within you. All right, I'm just at an hour. This was fun. To the original questioner, Oregon is a cool place. Here's my complaint about, I got a few complaints about Portland. I have to drive 20 minutes to a house of worship that suits me. All of the Vedic houses of worship are out in the suburbs, out in Intel land. And luckily, the one I go to, Brahma Premananda, it is an interfaith ashram. And they have shrines to multiple deities. They've got Rama and his family, Hanuman, Mahavira, Jesus, the Sikh gurus, Shiva, Parvati. It's a pretty cool place. There's not too many Sikhs or Hindus within Portland proper. There's not. It's also just a pretty white city in general. But the natural beauty is exquisite. It's, yeah. All right. So the person who asked this question, I hope this satisfied their answer. I hope it also brings peace to anyone else who is seeking to begin to cultivate a relationship with God. I've been that age before. 20 is hard. And it is during that time that you're really starting to question what it's all about, and your sense of belief starts to crystallize. But it's worth it to believe that there is a God. If you're right, you have everything to gain, and if you're wrong, when you get to the end, you will have nothing to lose. That was Pascal's wager, which also brought me a degree of peace. That was during the whole spiritual crisis that I had at the end of my college tenure. Was encountering Pascal's wager brought me some calm. Then I had that aha moment that brought me to a relaxing degree of peace. All right. Well, parting thoughts. Who I'm at 108. It's a sacred number. It's good to have a spiritual practice, something that gives you a degree of grounding, a chance to reflect on who you are, how you fit into the scheme of things, your purpose in life, thinking about more than just the day's activities, thinking about more than just your laundry, and think about how you can pay it forward. At the very least, to pay it forward. So think about how you can build that into your life. Those books that I pulled up, some of them are easier to find than others. A lot of them you can find at chain bookstores. So it's worth looking for them. Last thing. I had Ganesh watching the whole time, and I think he did his job just fine. So with that, I'm going to sign off. This is the first of many videos where I hope to talk about faith at a degree of length. Keep the questions coming. Never stop asking. And one of the keys to really developing that meaningful relationship with God is to let go of serious adulthood intellectualism and to get back in touch with your wild childhood side. To really reconnect with your sense of wonderment. Because it's that sense of wonderment that's going to get you there to God. It's not sitting there and being an egghead about it. That's why we've got so many people out there who draw the conclusion that there's nothing out there. They think too much. All right. Sai Ram, thank you all so much. Yes, I want to end my stream. Take care, guys.